All right, good evening, everyone. Tuesday, April 16th, Saco Planning Board will begin this evening with a workshop item. We have this evening one workshop item, and it is for 10 residential dwelling units at 32 Ferry Road. This is just a sketch plan review. We have with us the applicant, Mr. Gadbois, and anything you would like to add to that, Emily?
No, thank you, other than we have worked with the applicant on several iterations of this plan. The updated plan that was in the meeting packet demonstrates those changes to the site. So the applicant can give you more information on that, but they have taken our feedback and amended the site a couple of times. So what you're seeing before you has been changed already several times. So tonight's an opportunity to hear from the planning board, get some feedback and input from you, and give the applicant some comments and questions to walk away with for when they're ready to submit site plan and subdivision application.
All right, great, thank you, Emily. Would the applicant like to give us a brief presentation here?
Yes, good evening. My name is Paul Gadbois. I prepared the sketch plan application that you have in front of you this evening. Like Emily stated, we did go through a few different renovations to try to figure out what would work for this site. Unfortunately, the site is only, the widest point is 135 feet. So when you apply the 20-foot non-disturbed buffers, there's no room for buildings on both sides of the proposed driveway. So they all have to be on one side or the other. We chose this particular plan because we thought it fit better with the neighborhood. We are trying to protect a 42-inch oak tree as you come into the project, so we tried to veer around that to protect that oak tree. The engineers Joe had a lot of comments in regards to the project, but none of them were substantial, and they're all very doable for the next submission. We are filling wetlands. We're trying to fill 6,000 square feet of wetlands on this project. We did get a DEP permit to actually fill those wetlands. We haven't received the Army Corps wetland permit yet, and we will. We'll most likely have to pay a compensation fee because we're over 5,000 square feet of fill, which would probably be around $30,000 for a compensation wetland fee to the Army Corps of Engineers. The project is in an urban impaired watershed, so we have to meet water quality, water quantity, for the project, and plus we have to pay compensation to the city for compensation fees for stormwater. I know some abutters brought up some concerns, and it's pretty much the typical concerns where flooding, downstream drainage, where's the water going to go, and the wildlife associated with the project. So in this case, obviously, everything flows to the north end of the property. We are proposing a stormwater pond to collect 95% of the impervious area, to treat 95% of the impervious area and to treat 80% of the developed area, and a stormwater quality and quantity pond. I believe that, so that meets the ordinance, city ordinance. I'm hoping this evening the planning board has a general, gives us a kind of a thumbs up for the sketch plan that we're proposing so we can move forward with the engineering and other information that we need to submit for preliminary. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Board members, any thoughts or questions for the applicant? Jim, sure.
Yes.
I don't think your microphone. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I was reading the comments from the abutters and some of the concerns they had about water, draining onto their property. The proposed detention pond that you have on the site, or you would have on the site, how is that done so that it can take care of some of the larger, like rainstorms? How does that work?
So this particular detention pond, I have it on the flat area of the project, so we're not going to be going into the steep slopes. So that's one thing for erosion control issues. It's sized to handle the 2-year, 10-year, and 25-year storm events. So we have storage capacity to store the 25-year storm, and then it releases it at a slower rate within the next 24 hours. So it releases it when the storm has passed and the watershed is pretty much clearing up. As far as quality, we're required to have a filter bed area, so it not only holds the 25-year storm event, it also has to infiltrate the 10-year event. So it treats quality at the same time.
So I guess my question is, we've been having some pretty crazy storms last few years, and I guess we got a couple examples of that in January. And I don't know what type of a storm event those were, if those are 100-year storm events or 50-year or 25-year.
Yeah, there's a 25-year storm event is 6.4 inches in a day, so they didn't approach a 25-year.
Okay, all right.
So 25 years is 6.4 inches in one day.
All right, so as best you can tell, this proposed detention pond would alleviate a severe runoff onto the neighbor's property?
And most likely we'll be looking at the 50, for sure at the 50-year and the 100-year event.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Gabois,
Yes.
adding to that, the detention pond, is there any outfall to it, or?
Yes, this detention pond will most likely be built up, and there will be an outflow pipe and structure coming out of the pond, and that will discharge to the low end of the site. Correct, yep.
Where would that be? Where would the low end of this site?
Right, here's my pond, there'd be an outlet pipe here. Because it drops off significantly, right? It drops off from where I'm building my pond, it's elevation 76, and it drops off to 70, but we won't be nearly going that far down. We're going to be, our pond's going to be above grade pretty much.
So the detention pond would outlook
Correct.
towards
Obviously.
sort of the northeast,
Yep, we have no,
back end of the property.
correct, yep. Has a discharge to the low end of the site, right? And it'll be on a level spreader, riprap outlet, so we, obviously to avoid erosion.
Jeff?
So just so, just so I'm clear, if we're discharging to that north end site and we're at, 76 at the edge of the north edge of the pond, you have a 6-foot fall to pretty much the existing wetlands. So we're going to be holding storm surge, kind of letting it settle and pre-treat before it goes through your bypass. But any bypass is basically going into an existing, already low-lying wetland, correct?
No, it's going to be bypassing to, we don't have, the only wetlands on our property is right here. So we have no other wetlands associated with the property. So this is the only wetlands on our property. This is not wetlands.
So what is showing as kind of a red outline, it says 70, the elevation of 70 between your parcel and, looks like 29A Ocean Park Road.
Correct.
Orchard Road. It'll be in that area, correct? Which is the lowest point?
No, but most likely it might exit around 74. It doesn't have to go that far down to exit at 70. But yes, I'll exit probably 74 with a riprap outlet, which will eventually end up at elevation 70. Correct. That's where the water is going to end up.
It's going to end up there.
Correct.
And is there any provisions to allow the rate of outflow from your pond?
Yes, I got to meet the 2, 10, and 25-year requirements for the storm. So I do the pre-storm calculations, and that'll tell me what's currently going in that low point. My developments are obviously going to increase that flow rate, so I have to detain, the pond's going to be big enough to hold a 2, 10, 25-year storm events.
If I can just interject for a minute. We have a mic here too that you could borrow if you want to point to anything on the screen.
Totally up to them. I'm okay.
Any other thoughts or questions from the board members?
I mean, Mr. Chair, I have my list if everyone feels like they're done with the stormwater topic.
Sure.
So just things that I think that we're going to want to have more information on, that I had, basically the common mailbox location, like to see where
course.
that is. Dumpster and recycling, so you're going to be having on-site dumpster and recycling. Didn't know where the provision for that was going to lie. Obviously interested in location and screening.
No, there'll be individual that, we'll sub this out. They're going to come in and pick up trash in front of the units.
Oh,
There won't be a dumpster.
so each unit would have its own recycling containers that they might be storing in the front, and they'll wheel them out to their curb,
Correct.
okay?
And that would not be at the street, but
Not at the street.
at their building face.
No way would the city allow me to put 10, or how many would that be, 20 recycle bins at that, it's just, no. So there'll be a private on-site pickup, no dumpster.
So one of my concerns would be then what provisions would be there for kind of hiding their refuse containers? Obviously, there's kind of a street appeal here, so wondering if you have any options for that. I was interested, I had turnaround movements at the end for emergency vehicles. If they were to come in here, can we see the overlay at that hammerhead?
Yeah, that turnaround is designed to accept fire trucks.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we have that in the final plans, that'll be one of the things I'll be interested in. And as well as the private trash hauler that you contract with.
Sure.
Because they're going to have to go in there and turn around as well. Obviously, a lighting plan.
Of course.
The heat sources, we talk about this often now with many units being heat pump driven. Where are you planning on putting those as far as screening and noise? Sidewalk on the frontage. I think you've got that, and it sounds like there's a curb delineation there.
That's correct.
There's a little discussion about street trees, kind of what your final plan will be on that.
Yep.
As well as the transformer utility
Sure.
locations.
Yep.
The final question, a couple questions had to do with like aesthetics and design appeal. The sketch on the final page shows a roof line, and I guess I don't understand how each one of these units can have that kind of roof line, you know, tying into the side profiles. I didn't know if you were staggering a design, and you know, as long as we get it at some point so we know what the difference in the units will look like.
The owner is here, the builder. They're going to be 2 units, then we're going to stagger 2 feet, 2 more units, stagger 2 feet, another 2 units. So staggered, so it's not all one long rear wall, obviously.
So you're talking like a frontal dimension from the parking lot or curb sidewalk?
Correct.
But I was just looking, what I interpreted on the final page that you submitted on 28, it was a side profile, and it said, you know, right front elevation, and you know, you've got the kind of the roof line that would be basically dripping on the units on either side of it, and I just didn't know how you were going to make that work, if it was going to be like a different roof line.
Yeah, are you talking on the ends of the units? Because they'll be connected as they go down. So the other ends,
So I guess when on this preliminary form on 28, I think you have the
Yeah.
submitted page. As you look at that in the upper right, it says 22 by 28 front right elevation. I'm thinking that that is the elevation when I'm standing on the curb
Yeah.
in front. So each one of those roofs, if they're kind of all connected, I don't know what you're,
when they're connected and they stagger back, we'll do some sort of guttering system or some way to wick away the water so it doesn't have the overhangs for them.
okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely, you know, make it all aesthetically looking as they go to get the water away.
because obviously I think we'll all be looking at the design standards of Chapter 179. And then probably, there'll be a homeowners association, or will this be owner-maintained and rented out?
Homeowners Association.
Homeowners in HOA.
So obviously, then we'll look at the docs for that. You know, my first thought is it's kind of a tight, you know, obviously a very tight parcel, and you're trying to fit as many in as you can. But there's one just down the street from you that's very similar to this, and it seems like it works quite well. So maybe, you know, there's some opportunity here to make it flow and.
Yeah, they were wonderful. We worked about 3 times going around to get to this point, so, the planning board.
And I guess the final question that we kind of have, are any of these intended to be particularly low income, or is it assessed housing, or assisted
Well, I
housing?
mean, the price points right now are all indicating like low 4s, but we're not like having 2 units as low income, but the way the market is right about now, $399 to $459, depending on. We all know how that goes.
Yes,
So
you're
for
just.
Ferry Road, it's very affordable.
Yes, you're not coming forward to us asking for any,
No, I'm not.
it's like
And I-
considering that
No,
the
I'm
city's
not.
goals of trying to find more affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's kind of my
We
point.
try, yeah, it's not, yes, we are not asking for
That's your decision. So those are kind of my topics that I'll be looking for in the more final review.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Any other board member thoughts? Additionally, Jeff hit on a lot of the items I had as well. Clarity on snow storage, landscaping, fencing. Jeff touched upon the architectural component as well, and I had questions about that, trying to understand how you control 2 roofs coming together and keeping that from leaking. But then just sort of I understand the step backs, but sort of the overall character of this row house, if you would, on Ferry Road. Seems a little bit out of character. I know there are some multifamily buildings out there, but trying to understand how that's coming together, really. And then we started talking about it and the detention pond, understanding that low area in the back, and what's happening with that area there, I think, needs some particular attention and understanding how that is all working. But I guess, is this a new curb cut as well?
Correct.
New curb cut. I think, and you mentioned, you mentioned a large oak tree. Is that the one here in the back of the property, or is there
Right here.
something at the, okay. Is there anything, are there any large trees at the front? I know the Ferry Road has a lot of great, large, beautiful trees at the front. I didn't know if
Not
there
really,
are any
no.
trees, nothing there that's being affected. Okay.
I think there was the 42-inch oak and then the 48-inch pine. We can't save both, and I think the oak is a much prettier tree than that pine, so obviously the road or driveway is going through the pine.
Okay. Other than that, I didn't have any additional thoughts. Jim, Joyce?
You mentioned fencing. Are you going to have fences, planted buffers, or both?
We could do a combination. There's a lot of trees along the borderline. We are required to do a 20-foot, non-disturbed buffer, so we're going to have a landscape architect, provide what he thinks needs to fit for that buffer in that area. So it could be a combination of fence, trees. So I guess my biggest thing is the character. Obviously, hate to get to the 9th hour and say that the character doesn't fit the neighborhood, because it's a pretty tough situation. You know.
Sure, yeah, I understand. Well, for example, we have, from the site plan here, we have 10 units, and they're put tight together, and then we have a short representation of a piece to it. So I think that's, I guess, the representation here is a little bit out of context.
If I could, kind of like
Sure.
the concept that I have, you don't have it yet, but you'll get it, is I'm like, I've done a lot of building in this town. I'm kind of trying to make these, I don't want a row-looking house. I'm gonna do board and batting on the front. I'm gonna do 2 colors at a time, like a white and then a gray, and then change the colors. I'm gonna do black windows with white, do board and battings on the front, nice-looking porches, all these I'm gonna make them look like it's fits into Ferry Road. That's my whole goal, like a farmhouse / feel. That I'm gonna spend the extra money to make those fronts look really, really sharp, which you'll see in the design, which we'll present next. That's my plan. Not just gonna build a row house. I'm gonna make it's gonna have my name on it. I want it to look really nice.
Okay, well, that's sort of where I'm getting at. It
Yeah,
just
that's-
looks like,
that's- Yeah,
it just looks like a short little
yeah.
2-story little apartment building that could be anywhere.
Yeah, it's
And
not gonna
understanding the fabric of Ferry Road, I think the particular expectation, that's what the question is. I think that's where Jeff was going and starting to, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of my questions is the frontal approach and whether you change roof lines as a whole or, completely change siding material, but that's your creative right, and that's what, I think we're all looking for is that the Ferry Road is, a certain aesthetic, as you've already recognized, and so anything you can do to really break it up, and if it's not just a cookie cutter with a different color on it, I think would really help our appeal. And, but it does meet some objectives of the town when we talk about walkability and, communication between units. And I guess I think it was the old bus terminal, it's just before you on the Ferry Road. And that one doesn't have as much character because obviously it was a repurposed building. But I've had the opportunity to be in there sometimes, and it does create kind of a nice feel. And I'm not sure about the depth here, and because it's a pretty narrow lot, and I know that lot's a little bit more spacious. So I'd probably be wanting to see a site walk as we move forward. But architecturally, if we could see some variation, and then buffering particularly for units 1 through 3, kind of knowing what's taking place on that photometrics. For the light trespass, it is pretty close to the abutters there on 26 Ferry Road. So just kind of knowing where, some of the light trespass and what might remain there for buffering will be, I think, of importance, too.
We'll definitely be addressing lighting, obviously. And then it can be, in that area, might be a combination of fencing, landscaping. Because the tree line doesn't really start till we get down in this area. So it's kind of all grass. So we definitely will beef that up with landscaping. And so I guess I was just more, I know it's a 10-unit, all combined 10 units. And it's pretty much what fits the site. We're allowed 11 units in this property, but obviously I want to keep the pond on the uphill side and not push the pond further back towards the rear of the property. So that's why we settled with 10 units.
Jim?
I think it'll be very interesting to see what you can come up with for the design. I used to live many years ago at the very beginning of the Ferry Road, and I know there's a mix of houses there. You got a ranch, you got big 2-story, huge houses, and sort of side by side, and of course it gets different as you go down the hill past I think is it Pine Ridge Road, but. So you probably certainly have a lot of flexibility here, and look forward to seeing what you can come up with that can work with that mix.
Is that something that we could come back in front of the board for the architectural appeal of the project before we do all the engineering, or Is that something we need to do all the engineering and have the complete application before we can show our vision of what the building's gonna look like, I guess?
So it's my understanding that applicants could come in for multiple sketch plan reviews. If you just request it again, and you just have to pay the fee again, then we'll reschedule you, that's fine. Do you want to just point out that the planning department had actually asked for the applicant to go back and look at this concept of bringing the buildings together in effort to have a little bit more lawn, a little bit more green space on the site, because it is a tight site. But certainly, that's an option open to applicants to come back again before a full submission.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would help. I think conceptually, I think that could work. Maybe touching upon some of these items.
Sure.
Maybe not necessarily in a plan, for example. We're still in our sketch plan.
Right.
We're talking conceptually, so maybe thinking about, maybe responding in some fashion to some of the thoughts. that
I
we've
think
had.
landscaping and building design is probably the two critical factors. The rest are engineering, the stormwater and sewer and those type of things, obviously, are technical in nature. But obviously, the building design and landscaping, I think, is something that the board should see.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Well, yeah, I agree with Jeff about the idea of a site walk at some point.
Of course.
It'd be nice to see it all staked out so we can visualize.
Yes. Yep, I agree.
And sooner the better for a sidewalk, but you probably won't schedule sidewalks until we have a complete application, right? All right. Yep.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, with that, welcome everyone. Today is Tuesday, April 16th. The Saco Planning Board. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Planning Board and valued community representatives. I welcome you all to this evening's assembly of the Saco Planning Board. As chairman, it is my privilege to convene this gathering dedicated to the thoughtful planning and development of our community. Today, we come together with a shared commitment to shaping the future of our city in a manner that reflects our values, respects our heritage, and fulfills the needs of our residents both now and in the future. Our agenda tonight contains important matters, each requiring a careful consideration, expertise, and collaboration. As we engage in our deliberations, let us remember that the profound impact these decisions will have on our lives, keeping in mind we are residents like you. It is our duty to maintain transparency, fairness, in all of our proceedings, ensuring that the voices of all are heard and respected. Together, we must embrace the responsibilities entrusted to us by our community, working diligently and thoughtfully to chart a course that fosters growth, prosperity, and harmony. With that, I would like to call this meeting of the Saco Planning Board to order. I look forward to a productive discussion and meaningful outcomes that lie ahead. With that, this evening, we have myself, Matt Provenzel, the Planning Board Chair. To my left, Joyce Larry Clark, our Vice Chair. And to her left, Jeff Brucho. And then to my right, Jim Molier. We also have our planning staff with us this evening, our planner, Emily Cole Prescott and Lisa Harmon, and our City Council liaison, Phil Hatch. Our first item of the evening is the approval of the minutes from April 2nd and our April 3rd site walk.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes of the April 2nd Planning Board meeting and the notes from the April 3rd site walk as presented.
Second?
Thank you for the motion, Joyce, and the second, Jim. Any additional comments or edits? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes?
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. The minutes have been accepted as presented. Moving along, our next item is a application completeness review for Seacoast Land Acquisitions. Sebago Technics is the agent for this one. This is a preliminary subdivision and conditional use and site plan review for 14 single-family unit condominium development in the Blaine Street, Roebuck Avenue area. This is map 40, lots 3, 4, 9, 10, and 11 within the medium-density residential zoning district. Emily?
Thank you. So applicant Seacoast Land Acquisitions requests this review. It's for 14 single-family units, as you've noted, condominium development. It's off Blaine Street and Roebuck Avenue. The zoning is medium-density residential. Multifamily residential project up to 8 units per building is a conditional use, which is why we're doing conditional use review as well. The planning board first saw this. The applicants were here back last year, March 7th, during workshop to talk about the project. Since they've done additional work on redesigning the project, which they'll go over. Tonight, you're asked to determine whether you find the application complete. We've included departmental reviews that we've received so far. Any outstanding reviews the applicant will be asked to address before the public hearing meeting. Just looking at ordinance standards for review here, as well as whether or not the board wants to have a site walk is a question from staff. Whether the board wants us to send this to Conservation Commission for advisory comments is another question. And then we're asking you if you will schedule your public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And we have the applicant with us this evening.
Yes,
Go
hello.
ahead.
I'm Kendra Ramsell. I'm a civil engineer and project manager with Sebago Technics, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, which is Seacoast Land Acquisitions, LLC. To get you oriented to start, we are located at the end of Roebuck Avenue to the southeast of, a portion of land to the southeast of the end of Roebuck. As Emily mentioned, the project area is a total of 5 lots that have been combined, and the land also kind of encompasses a paper street, which is Eastern Avenue. Access to the site is provided from the end of Roebuck. You would come to the end and take a right, and come down what we've identified as Blaine Street, which is also a paper street. So a little complicated with the parcels here. But what we're proposing is 14 single-family, single-unit condominiums. They are 2 stories and contain a 1-car garage. We've also provided parking for 2 parking spaces within the driveway of each unit. So there's 3 total parking spaces for the units. Emily also mentioned that we were here last March. We presented pretty much the same project, but we did have to dig into the rights of the paper streets quite a bit, and found that we had to shift over the access drive to the left side, as we were only able to secure an access easement from the abutter to the west, which is Mercier. So that's why you see that Blaine Street and our access road is within a 25-foot swath on the left side in plan view and is not centered on Blaine Street's technical right-of-way. So moving forward, we are proposing kind of a T-shape so that we've provided emergency access for fire and EMS. We have also provided pedestrian connectivity by extending the sidewalk adjacent to Roebuck all the way down Blaine Street, or the access way, and into the project site. We're also proposing 3 light poles with kind of a pedestrian feel. They're about 15 feet in height, and we have, since submitting, have provided a photometrics plan and are meeting they're full cutoff fixtures, and we don't have any light spill over the property lines. There's also 1 light currently on a utility pole at the end of Roebuck. So we've covered our bases as far as lighting and safety go, and from that perspective. For utilities, we are pretty much all public utilities. Public water, public sewer, We are connecting to the public storm drain that's located within Roebuck, and all of these public utilities will be extended from Roebuck. And that also includes power. A portion of the power will be overhead just until we get about halfway down Blaine Street, and then we drop underground and go to the different transformers from there. I believe we're proposing 3 of those for the project. As far as stormwater goes, we were required to treat 90% of impervious area per the ordinance. We are within the Goose Fair Brook watershed, which is urban impaired. So we are now, I believe when we first submitted this, we had a misunderstanding about which watershed Roebuck and this area was draining to. So we thought at first that a portion was in the Saco River watershed and a portion was in Goose Fair Brook, but it turns out that most of the project site drains to Goose Fair Brook. So since then, we've been working with the city engineer to meet the urban impaired standards. Essentially, we're treating 90% of impervious area as required, and we will pay a fee associated with the urban impaired standard. We're also providing detention with that treatment. We've proposed porous pavement on the greater majority of the pavement that is proposed, as well as building drip edge filters on all 14 units. So we are meeting peak rates now at all identified study points, of which there are 3. And just a small portion, or some of Blaine Street and the access road will drain to the city system, and we've identified that as a study point as well. So we also provided a pipe capacity analysis for the city engineer to review. And as far as permits go, as Emily mentioned, we've submitted a site plan review permit subdivision because we are over, I think in Saco it's 13 units, and as well as a conditional use permit. As far as impervious is concerned and DEP, we are required, or I'm sorry, we've obtained a stormwater PBR or an NOI through the DEP. And then the remainder of the stormwater will be reviewed by the city engineer through delegated review. And we have also been approved for an NRPA permit associated with the wetland impact for the roadway crossing that's proposed. We've proposed just under 5,000 square feet of impact. In addition to that, we have an Army Corps self-verification permit, which we've also gained approval for. That's all, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. Board members, any thoughts or questions for the applicant here? As a reminder, this is an application for completeness, no requested waivers. I, of course, have site plan questions, but I'll hold those to the review. But as far as the application goes, any questions, Jeff?
I was wondering if you could shed some clarity for me about the Biddeford Saco Water Company's capacity to serve. There seemed to be some correspondence that was going back and forth, and they were kind of leaving it up to like the fire suppression engineer or fire suppression company. And some of it had to do with metering sizes, but it also sounded like there's an existing 4-inch main in the street, and they were planning on coming off with an 8-inch main. And there was concern, or I interpreted there was some concern about the capacity with the fire suppression, or if that was only the metering to the individual units.
So we've been working with the sprinkler designer on that, and we fully anticipate being able to propose a 4-inch main. So there wouldn't be, there's a 4-inch existing main within Roebuck, and we wouldn't be upsizing that to an 8-inch at this point, now that we've had further correspondence with the water district and the sprinkler designer. What we're missing, or actually, I'm sorry, we just received it, and we're making changes now to our plans, but we needed the pressure at Roebuck Ave in order to determine if that 4-inch system was going to work, and we've confirmed that it will. So we'll be working on, with our next resubmittal, when we address the engineer's comments, we'll also address water comments that we've received.
So with that data, is that like a trended 24-hour plot line of the pressure at the end of Roebuck? Yeah. Is
We
that
have-
something that can be provided if it was tested for?
I'm sure that could probably be provided by the, by the sprinkler designer. And we've also adjusted the size of the service lines in accordance with the water district. They're 1 inch from the 4-inch main to the curb stop, and then they're 1.5 from the curb stop to the individual houses or condominiums.
Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a number, I'm just looking at the checklist for, I guess, site plan, conditional use, and subdivision approval. And it looks like there's a number of items that haven't been checked off yet. I don't know if this is a question more for Emily than the applicant, but for instance, the waste disposal plan, lighting plan, there's something about design guidelines that hasn't been provided yet.
So I can update a little bit on that
That'd be great.
if you want, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
So the waste disposal plan, what we're asking for at the next submission is just a capacity letter from a private hauler, but I believe that you have enough. They did provide an updated waste disposal plan. So I'm not sure why that wasn't changed to checked, but we do have updated documentation in the the latest response packet. The lighting plan, for the next round of submission, we're just asking for the fixtures themselves to be presented, but we do have a photometric plan in the file that we can continue to review at this point. So it's just a matter of asking what fixtures specifically. The design guidelines, those have been responded to since this checklist as well. So they were responded to for residential structures. I don't know that we have a draft HOA condo doc set on file.
We're still working on that. Jason's attorney has been on vacation for a week, so we'll get that to you as soon as possible.
I think those were the primary questions. Is that correct?
It looks like it, about how open space will be owned and managed. I think those are the only ones, but it sounds like they've all been dealt with or will be dealt with very shortly. That's the impression that you have?
Yeah, they've definitely been started and responded to in the April submission packet, and there might be more comments that we need to get addressed for those items, but those can certainly be asked for upon review.
Just to address the open space question, on the last page of the packet, there's a condo plat plan. I think it's specifically called Condominium and Unit Preliminary Subdivision Plan. And we show the area surrounding the unit, like how far off of the unit, how far offset will be included within the condo plat. Everything outside of that area will be owned and maintained by the HOA. So that is the common space for the project, including the entire length of Blaine Street will be owned and maintained by the HOA. And we are not, this is a private way that we're proposing. We're not proposing a public right-of-way or road.
And do we need, do we actually need the HOA documents to declare the application complete? If we know that it's a requirement that they have to meet to get approval eventually? Is that critical for the completeness of the application?
So this is an item that, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
So this is an item that has come up before, and I will say in the past, Saco has looked to get those HOA docs upon final review. But it is something that's listed in the preliminary subdivision review. I can pull up this section if you want to give me a second, so we can just get it directly from the ordinance section.
So Emily, as you've mentioned, in the past where there's typically so much back and forth between the applicant's counsel and city council, that being legal counsel, some of the items, Jim, that we've had here with discussion and sort of this preliminary sort of condo plan, I guess for me, the process has started. We have a document that's beginning to get us there. So I think it's starting to meet the intent there. We know the condo docs get changed up until the minute they get recorded, sort of thing. But definitely a good question to bring up and talk about.
And I think if I can, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Some of this is to specify what is public infrastructure versus what is private. And in this case, Saco's subdivision standards say if you review 14 units, dwelling units, it automatically triggers subdivision review. So I think as long as it's noted that we will need to review those as part of the next steps, I think that would be important.
Yes. Any other questions or thoughts from board members? Jeff?
I have a couple, I guess. One of them is, I noticed that the lighting plan was submitted after, it's like on page 68, so it meets the criteria. I think the applicant before final will have to review. I don't think that the lighting uniformity meets chapter 230, 604B, the criteria for uniformity along private driveways, particularly what you're calling Blaine Street coming in. Needs to be like within 4-to-1 ratio of average to minimum. And we would probably want some detail because it's a fairly large section of Blaine Street that's not shown on the photometric plan. At some point, you're doing the transition from overhead power to underground, and it looks like because there's is it a physical drain feature or something? That's why you're not bringing underground power all the way in?
There's a couple things, and a lot of it has to do with the area that we're allowed to develop in, and the angles and how that would have to drop underground in coordination with the poles that are already existing at the end of Roebuck. So that's why we proposed it that way. We're underground internal to the project, and Blaine Street outside of the property line is kind of a no man's land.
So I guess as a board, do they need a waiver for the overhead power if part of it is coming into the site overhead? But getting back to the lighting uniformity, they should include if that pole, if you're gonna have a utility mounted pole, and then whatever additional poles you need along Blaine Street to meet the uniformity requirements in our zoning chapter.
Sure, we can certainly incorporate the existing light at its height and whatever fixtures used there into the photometrics. I just want to note that we've had a lot of conversations with the two abutters. Mercier is planned left, and Roebuck Estate LLC is to the right, but we've personally spoken with the owner of that lot as well. And in the neighborhood meeting, it was stated that more light in front of their properties was not preferred. So that is the reason why we didn't propose any lighting along that strip of Blaine Street or that section. Although if it's not in conformance with the standard, I can understand why the board would want a pole proposed.
Well, I just think we should be able to see. I mean, I can pretty much tell that that's going to be a pretty dark hole, and I get it if the abutters don't want it, but I don't necessarily see a letter of support or them here. So for safety's sake, I just have a little bit of thought process of emergency vehicles entering the space is that it's dark, and then they're going to have to essentially back out, especially if they're a larger apparatus. Anything other than an ambulance is going to have to be backed out, because the spaces, you have one in the garage and two in the driveway, which means essentially the driveways could be filled up. There's no real turnaround for any municipal safety vehicles other than backing up or trying to get to that Blaine Street.
So,
So I think lighting is going to be part of the topic.
so I guess circling back, to your original question for the application. So we have the photometrics plan. I guess the question, it seemed like it sort of stemmed from your question of the underground power and what happens for that portion of Blaine Street, right? Is that perhaps, Emily, that we can get some clarity there? I guess I want to try not to site plan the whole thing quite yet, but.
So we can certainly get any clarity that you want on underground power. I think the applicant can address those questions. As far as lighting goes, it may be beneficial to go on a site walk and see the area, and then maybe the applicant brings forward a waiver to uniformity standards in the lighting plan requirement, but that's something that does not have to be addressed with application completeness, at least in my mind, because you're looking to see if you have all the materials to move forward with the review. Similarly to how we looked at like the parking waiver, it's a waiver to the standards, not a waiver to the required submittals.
Correct. So we have the lighting plan, we have the photometrics, it has some cut sheets on it. We have it for the application, we have a bunch of questions on it come site plan time, and then I'm not sure if it's a required waiver of underground power. The site needs it, but there's that, as the applicant mentioned, this sort of no man's land. I don't think that's necessary to hold up the application review, but if the process continues to get clarity there, maybe from the city engineer, but.
I also think like if you did want to do a site walk could bring clarity as to where overhead power is right now. You can kind of see what the area has.
Yeah, I would support a site walk as well. Did I get to your?
So, Mr. Chair, my question was in no way, they've submitted a lighting plan to me, it checks the box. I
Okay.
do have concerns that they can, address before final, and obviously a site walk will work. My only question that kind of stemmed off of that was if we would need a waiver, because a fairly long portion would be overhead before it enters their developed area. Do we as a board consider that the subdivision is not being served by underground utilities? I guess that's, for the four of us just to decide because if we feel like they did need a waiver, then it's not complete. If we feel like we're fine to move forward, then the required application completeness has been fulfilled.
Thank you for the clarity. I guess, Emily, to Jeff's question there, to maybe try to create some sort of understanding there. I mean, from the property, could you, so it's underground, could you point out I'm trying to find it here,
Sure.
where the underground, where it transitions from overhead to underground?
Yep, so if you look at the utility plan, which is sheet 5 of 13, we're crossing from the northern side of the hammerhead on Roebuck Ave, all the way over to a pole, which is dropped in, if you look closely, it's near SMH2, which is a sewer manhole, and there's also a note pointing directly to the riser pole. Install utility pole in coordination with CMP and electrical contractor. Do you see that?
There it is, yes, I
Yeah,
see it.
that's where, oh, I'm sorry, it is shown as overhead. My apologies. That should be so so it's shown as overhead until you, on these current plans, until you get to the T where the road has its intersection. And then we drop underground to the first transformer, which is between units 2 and 3. So if it's preferred, I think it would be more in line with the ordinance if we put a riser pole along Blaine Street prior to the property line that crosses the Blaine Street access road, and then dropped underground from there. That would be possible.
Yes. I see your question now, Jeff, more clear. Yeah, I guess that would be the expectation, maybe that first pole that it hits into the property, that's where the riser is.
And it was also brought up as a review comment. The way that the overhead is shown currently, it crosses the very corner of the Mercier property. You can see it on the utility plan, which would technically, I think if there's an overhead line over his property, it needs an easement in order to be maintained. So if we dropped a pole further back on Blaine Street, then we'd be avoiding that issue. It would, change the angle so that we weren't crossing over the Mercier property, and then we could dive underground from there. It's not a problem.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity, when you say that, you're talking about near the proposed stop bar or the 25-foot easement section, that you would have a riser pole there and then go underground along your new construction of Blaine Street?
Yeah, I think we could, so from the point where the parcel, our subject parcel crosses the Blaine Street right-of-way, in what I would call internal to the project, do you see that dashed line, bold dashed line, near OCS 1 on the utility plan? I would say until about that point, we could run overhead. It might take 1 or 2 poles. And then we could drop underground from there so that we are truly underground from the property line into the project. And another reason that we proposed, not to muddy the waters, but another reason that we proposed overhead utilities is because we have sewer, water, and storm drainage mains all within a 25-foot strip, which is really hard to construct. And so we pulled underground power overhead just until we could widen out to that 50-foot right-of-way internal to our project because of space to install the utilities. That was the true reason.
All right, thank you for the clarity. So I suspect, I guess for me, board members, the plan here with, I guess we have underground power to overhead to a particular point, then it's underground to the units. The discussion here, the intent to not request a waiver, not to request a waiver, working through the plan. I mean, I'm satisfied with the application materials here and the discussions had to say that the applicant understands the plan needs to be revised and that there's not a request for a waiver here. So I'm comfortable continuing with it. Not sure how the rest of the board members feel.
Mr. Chair, I'll, just to move this along, I'll move to find the application complete.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I'll second.
Second by Joyce, thank you. Any additional discussion? Jeff?
If I could, I was just wondering, did anybody else, I had a hard time making a firm conclusion of the wetland delineation. The peer review noted on several locations that there was a 10 to 15-foot wide area that appeared to be kind of like mismarked or wasn't quite included in the delineation. And it seemed like it was a fairly long area from what I could see on his highlighted map when he drew it up. But I didn't really, in his summary, I couldn't tell if it was enough to be a major oversight in the calculations of wetlands, maybe if Emily could weigh in a little bit on what the staff found?
Yeah, so I think this is a function of the board seeing the application kind of progress through the process, because normally you see the in the past, you've seen the application after all these comments were farther along, but it's not uncommon that we'll send there'll be a wetland delineation done on a site, and we do a follow-up, our own peer review of the wetland delineation and wildlife considerations. It's not uncommon that two soil scientists will go out and have slightly different takes on the site. And so what we're going to be doing is asking the applicant to respond to those comments, and if there's still concerns in the field, then what happens is I'll usually coordinate with the agent, the two wetland scientists, to meet on the field, and they use the best practices to determine where the wetland is. So like I said, not uncommon that this can happen. You may see this more as we do these applications and follow the state statute provisions on timelines, where you're seeing it a little quicker than you were in the past for subdivisions.
Thank you.
Okay, so that answers, I mean, they've completed the application, it's there, I'm fine, and we'll just see that in review, staff review later, so I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Emily, could you just make sure we get those, because I haven't seen that yet?
Yeah, they were emailed to you in the full meeting packet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were
For this-
emailed to,
They're in the
everything
bottom.
we have has been emailed out to you.
Okay, thank you, much appreciated.
Lisa emailed it to you, but we can always resend it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, motion made and second to accept the application as presented with the discussions to date. Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes,
I'll vote yes as well. Vote 4-0 to accept the application as presented.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to schedule a public hearing for the preliminary subdivision, conditional use, and site plan review for the Blaine Street, Roebuck Avenue site on May 28th, 2024.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second.
Joyce, the second, thank you. Comments? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes?
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
yes.
I would vote yes as well. With that, Emily, is there a potential to schedule a site walk for that date as well, prior to the meeting?
For April 28th?
May
28th?
May 28th, yes.
Potentially. Yeah, I will just say we had a little trouble getting back we did that with a site walk recently, but that was a huge property. So as long as we schedule it maybe 4 o'clock or so, we should have enough time.
Yes. I guess we still have, if our meeting begins at 6:30 perhaps, 4 o'clock isn't as necessary, but we can work on coordinate that. Okay. All right, thank you.
Is that something the board wants us to do?
Yeah, I think a site walk before the meeting that day works well. I guess for board members, we have a few absent with us this evening, not being able to speak for them, but it being in town, a smaller site, perhaps we don't need 2 hours, but it's just my thought. I know the last one we had was very lengthy. There's hundreds of acres to walk, but, Jeff?
Mr. Chair, I agree, having it the same day would be fine, but if we could maybe push it to 4:30 for those of us who still have to work. It is very close to City Hall, and I think we could easily accomplish a site walk without being pressed for time and make it back here for a 6:30 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
And I don't know if the applicant is available.
Yes. I just wanted to note as well, the site is fully wooded, so I don't imagine it taking very long. There's not really much to see there except for at the end of Roebuck, so.
I think that's sort of potentially the focus area.
Yeah.
But
Certainly.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, there will be flagging, right? Kind of the center line of the streets
Yep.
and limits of clearing, I would assume?
Yep.
Thank you.
There's, Emily has some of that information that we like to.
Yeah,
sort
we're,
of standard.
I think you'll be familiar with it, and I think Jason's familiar with it as well.
Okay. Limits of clearing is on that, the entire limit of
We
clearing?
will ask you, yeah, we will ask you
Okay.
for limits of clearing, but you can just kind of delineate it with, we'll follow up
Yep.
offline.
Great,
We have a
thank you.
month, so shouldn't be an issue.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Public,
Do
we
we,
need to
So the-
schedule the public
Yeah,
hearing.
So it'll be scheduled when? The 28th?
May 28th, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good to go?
Yeah, I'm all set. We have everything. We'll get the site walk
Okay.
scheduled for the 28th at 4:30. The only other thing was, do you want us to send this to Conservation Commission for advisory comments? That was the only other question on the list.
I think that's what they're there for, so I think I would support that, yes.
Okay, so we will follow up then and try to get that scheduled as well.
Great,
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's only an issue and if we want them to come on our site walk too, because then they really don't have time to compile comments between the site walk and the hearing at 6:30.
That's a fair point. Emily, any recommendation there? I mean,
It seems like we could do this potentially May 14th. I'm looking at Lisa to see if there's any conflicts that she's aware of. We have a Historic Preservation Commission meeting that evening, but it shouldn't impact the ability to have a site walk. If we wanted to do May 14th, I think that should work.
May 14th would work for me. I would support that day.
It's fine for me.
Jim?
It's fine, I just can't find the 28th one on my calendar already, so.
So that would just be a separate site walk? We don't have a meeting that evening?
Right, so we would schedule it for that day, but we probably would ask the Conservation Commission if maybe they could meet that night after the site walk, like we did last time.
That would be
Or
great.
they could go to they actually have a meeting on the 15th already on the calendar, so they could do the 14th and the 15th then.
Okay. If that works for them to join us, that would be great. And the applicant, of course.
So, Mr. Chair, not to complicate it, if we're not having a meeting afterwards, can we push it back a little bit, like closer to 5 o'clock for the site walk?
That would be great for me.
It's up to what the board wants.
I would prefer 5 o'clock.
I would
if
prefer
that's-
5.
That works for everyone.
Fine.
So the site walk time will be 5 PM on May 14th.
Yes.
Are there two, or is
Just
this
one.
Just one?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're revising the time so that they provide conservation.
Okay, and that's so that the Conservation Commission can join us on the site walk?
Yes.
And will we get review comments from them prior to the site walk or following the site walk so that we can be prepared for the 28th meeting?
So you will actually be invited to speak with the Conservation Commission directly, and you'll get their comments directly at the meeting. That's how the last one went.
Directly at the May 14th meeting? site
At
walk.
the May 14th or 15th meeting, depending on how their schedule works. Right now, they're scheduled to meet May 15th.
Okay, great.
I'll give you all these dates, though, so you have them.
Thank you. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next item of the evening is Pine Tree Holdings. This is the 13th subdivision amendment to Park North in the Cascades subdivision. BH2M is their authorized agent. And this is tax map 62, lot 1 through 5 in the Cascade Contract Zone in Portland Road zoning district. This is a public hearing and a continued application review. Do you have anything additional, Emily, on this item?
No, just we have a recap of our review here. A lot of the discussion topics are within the site plan review application, and really, the board is asked to have a public hearing this evening. We did have a note on the site plan review application about just maybe doing a legal review of easements internal to the parcels, making sure that that has a city attorney review on it. It's up to the board whether or not you want to tag that to this subdivision amendment or to the site plan review, or both. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And the applicant with us this evening, do you have anything to add or any updates?
No, nothing new in lumping the two items together, the subdivision and the site plan. We have met with Regina Leonard for the landscaping and sort of checked all those boxes with her. There's a letter in that packet that speaks to that. Same thing with Diane Morabito in terms of the traffic for all of our on-site traffic movements. We met with Diane and we squared away her comments. That too is in a letter as part of your packet. Same thing with staff. We've checked all the boxes for Joe Leverrier and Emily to date, and that brings us to the public hearing tonight.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Did you want me to give the update on site plan review now as well?
For the next item
Yes.
you're referring to? Sure, why don't you? I think we still want to, we'll review these, of course, and make determinations and findings as you've presented separately, but I think an overall big picture update is appropriate.
Okay, great. So like Walter had said, there have been updates since the last meeting. One of the things, though, the primary topic that staff has still is there's been some questions on the traffic movement permit. And the responsible party for the traffic movement permit, because we're in a unique situation where there's two owners now. So there's the applicant Park, or the developer Park North Development LLC for the entire subdivision. And then there's a separate now entity, Pine Tree Holdings. So there's a question about how many trips are assigned to what lot, and I'm going to recommend that certainly the board can open its hearing, hear from the public, but I think it's really going to be very important that anything get continued tonight until we get those answers addressed. And I think you might hear from a member of the public on this as well. But certainly we don't want to have a legal issue with tapping into the traffic movement permit with two different owners. This is the first time I've run into this specific situation relative to the number of trips looking to be permitted. So while the number of trips and the traffic movement permit technically can support what's being proposed from an engineering perspective, we just want to make sure from an ownership and responsible party perspective that we have these questions addressed. And you'll hear more about that, I'm sure, in the hearing. But I just want to make sure that was called out for the board. Other than that, we're moving forward with the rest of the review. We have provided you the review comments received to date, and a lot of them, Walter's worked hard to address a lot of them with his team.
Great, thank you, Emily. All right, any questions from board members here regarding our item at hand here on our agenda 4B, which is the 13th subdivision amendment? I guess that piece specifically for lots 1 through 5, if we begin there.
Yes, Mr. Chair, only, I think the legal review of the easement issues is critical enough that it makes sense to continue this for that reason as well. Not continuing the hearing in general, but continuing a final decision.
All right, thank you, Joyce. So, sorry, I'm trying to go back to our, So Emily, again, we have, not to confuse it, but we have the subdivision amendment, the 13th amendment, and then we have sort of this separate piece with the, sort of our next agenda item, Aroma Joe's, correct? That's sort of the pieces, the two pieces that we're talking about. So that's,
Yes.
so Joyce, are you referring to Emily's note about the site plan component of the review here for the next item, or is that how you've described it, Emily, as well, sort of the site plan component separate from the amendment?
So we are reviewing, so like the steps, the process steps you're taking are a subdivision amendment and then separately a site plan review. Certainly you can just hold your hearing on both because you're going to maybe hear comments on both. So you can decide that you want to open the hearing on the subdivision and site plan applications, and maybe that's the cleanest way to go about this. And then when you're ready, when you've heard from the public, you can give the applicant your feedback. And then if you're continuing it tonight, just continue the hearing to the next available meeting night.
So essentially where we have these two items, you're really sort of maybe recommending that we have discussion, hold a public hearing under both, as both of them. And then we can make findings on, I mean, there's still three components, right? There's the subdivision, well, there's a subdivision and there's a site plan.
I wouldn't get too bogged down on the process so far. So if you want to just continue everything, because it's all kind of being brought in together, that's fine. So just, open the hearing on both applications and then continue on both applications. You will be asked to make findings on each application separately, but just for members of the public, it may be easier to hear under one rather than open, close, open, close.
I understand, thank you. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, I move to open the public hearing for subdivision amendment and site plan review for map 62, lot 1 through 5, Cascade Road.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Second by Jim. So motion to open the public hearing for the items before us this evening for Park North and the Cascade subdivision, map 62, lot 1 through 5. Additional comments? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. The public hearing is now open for Pine Tree Holdings subdivision amendment and site plan review of Park North and Cascade subdivision. Again, map 62, lots 1 through 5. Members of the public are welcome to come to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. And we allow 5 minutes for initial comments, and any follow-up comments are typically limited to the 3 minutes. Anybody that would like to speak, please step forward.
Thank you. My name's Elliot Chamberlain. I'm the owner of Park North Development and the developer of the Cascade subdivision. I'll try to be quick to get through the 5 minutes. All the way back to our original TMP permit, which was achieved in April of 2008, which we had to come up with a certain number of trips that would be allocated, which would be generated from the entire subdivision. As with the second permit, the first permit basically broke up the entire subdivision, and we had to make assumptions as to how much and what type and what use and size and what trips got created from those assumptions into the permit so we could come up with a number. We got the permit approved, and years later, we were in a position where we had to redo the permit, which I believe got created, and Emily might be able to answer this, in 2020 or 2021. Again, at that point, we had to now count the trips that existed, that were already created, and go back and do the same the same thing. Look at all the lots that were undeveloped and make an assumption as to what would get built. This particular lot that's in front of you was originally sold to the Town and Country Federal Credit Union, and this was just before the downturn in '08. And their original intention, they bought 4 acres, was to build a roughly 15,000 square foot corporate office. After the downturn, and obviously a lot of things changed, they ended up selling about half of the property to another individual, the front 2.5 acres, 2.25 acres. That person built a fitness facility or a gym on the property, which probably by itself already outdid the trips that the office was going to generate. And now that lot is now being split again to create what I hear is an Aroma Joe's. While before the Aroma Joe's came into play back in 2021, while we were putting this together, we knew that the person that owned the gym and the remaining land had interest in building a roughly 5,000 or 6,000 square foot office building as he was advertising and putting out to the world. So in our formulas, in our additions, we planned for, on that lot, a 6,000 square foot office building and the trips that would be generated from that to account for those trips that would be built at some point, to come up with, again, a final number, and we got a certain number of trips approved. Obviously, that 6,000 square foot office building might produce, and I don't know the exact number, maybe anywhere from 5 to 20 trips per day. It's a little different in the morning than it is the evening, and a little different on Saturday. Now you've got a use that is estimated to have around 125 trips, so about 5 to 7 times what was allocated for that lot. And as Emily said, we're in a situation where you've got, this is now the third owner of that lot, working under a permit that's completely under me. Those trips alone, just that one Aroma Joe's, would end up completely taking the rest of the trips in our permit and about 86% of the overflow that DOT allows you. So I think we were around 500 or 600 trips allowed. You can always go over an approved permit by up to 99 trips. Once you reach 100, you got to amend the permit. They're going to go into that 99 by about 86%. That would basically leave us 14 trips to develop probably almost about 40 to 50% of the project still left to go. A remaining lot that Town and Country still owns, a couple of lots that Hancock Lumber still owns, the rear land, about 100 acres we own, about 20 acres of commercial, lots on Eastview Parkway, and then the old Monkey Trunks land. So we're being put in a position where we would have to go back and amend our permit just for this one use. We think that that lot has to stay within its allocated use of whatever that, let's call it 10 trips for this conversation. And if not, they should have to deal with the added trips in my math, that extra 115 trips, which may be a TMP movement permit just on their own merit. But it was never intended that somebody would come in and one lot would take up that many trips out of the that were allowed in our traffic movement permit. And that's a quick generalization of the situation, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions and try to break it down any further if you want to.
No, that's good. That helps add clarity for me. Thank you. Any questions?
And
members?
just so I can put it on record as to where we stand, we're hoping that this would get tabled until, like Emily said, this could be worked out, in some format, so it could move forward. I'm not here to try to stop the project. I'm here obviously only protecting our trips, so we can move forward, obviously, the same.
All right. Thank you. Jeff?
I think, is it probably best that we wait until after the public hearing's over to have some clarity, maybe from staff? I think it's the best time to do that.
So my recommendation tonight is that you just keep the public hearing open beyond tonight's meeting unless there's a major reason you don't want to. That way, any information that we get can be added to the record as we move forward. But I'm certainly happy to answer questions if there's a pause in the hearing and you want to have staff address questions. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, if there's a pause, So I have it kind of presents a little bit of a unique situation in my understanding is the developer went through and did the process and got an application, and we can all imagine that's probably a very daunting task to estimate what your build-out's going to be in the first. And then when you have to review it, you have to estimate what your empty lots are going to be to try to get a range of where they're going to be. But what I'm hearing now, or what I understood that I heard, is the original developer is still on the hook for the commitment of the traffic movement permit. But now there are multiple lots that are no longer in his control because they were sold, that haven't been developed, that could be developed, and he doesn't have control over that. But now is that is that something that we just say, well, it's the developer's problem, he has to figure it out, and he should have put deed restrictions on it? Or is it something that the city says, they need to be addressing these one at a time, these particular high-volume uses? It's kind of, I think it's difficult enough sitting on the board trying to go through all the data that's provided for these traffic movement permits, much less now trying to tally up as they funnel out on these collector streets to the major intersections as who's responsible for what percentage of the impact. That's a...
So if I can, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
I'm not saying it is or is not the board's responsibility right now to determine who is responsible for the impact. I'm saying we should get the answer before the board makes a decision and we're in a questionable position. So usually what we like to see, and I have not been in the position of two owners with, obviously we've had other developments in Park North, but not with this level of traffic. So to your point, Jeff, I think at the last meeting, it was a good point, and we have been continuing to monitor trips and information, as you saw in Diane Morbido's memo, so she continually keeps a running tally. But the question now is responsibility, and at the end of the day, we have a developer name on one permit and a different developer name on another set of on another permit. So I just think it needs to be clarified. And like I said, I don't have the answer for you tonight as to whether or not it's the board's responsibility to make the determination on who's the responsible party. I think more the determination is there a consideration that needs to be made for different owners and how the DOT will review this.
Thank you, Emily.
Mr. Chair, yeah, that would be exactly, as the city gets this consult and legal opinions, yes, specific to the application, but also I think what he's painted is a little bit bigger picture that we're going to see coming before us continuously. So if we can have the very insightful review for this particular project, but also, a 500-foot view of what does that mean for these parcels that are, Hancock lumber parcels that could be developed that he doesn't have control over. What does that mean going forward in the future? That would be helpful in my view.
Yep, so I know there was a lot of concern about, do we have a financial guarantee? And so the financial guarantee we're holding is under the original developer name. So happy to do, like I said, at a workshop session, a Park North TMP discussion. I know there's been a lot of questions about the Park North TMP, and maybe they weren't answered directly to this board when the TMP process was updated in 2020. So happy to bring back what we have. Certainly addressing this question for the future. It's already been a question in our office, is how do we need to address similar questions in the future as far as getting the responsible party information, so it will be good for us to have and to monitor certainly as we move forward. So it's just a matter of getting that information, I think.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, Jeff, good question. From sitting here, I'm sure Joyce can recall as well. It's complicated out there. We know we have traffic deficiencies in the city. We have tools at our disposal specifically for the sites to help mitigate that and control it. And now we have a scenario that's potentially adding a significant amount over what was designed for that particular area and permitted for that area. So responsibilities aside, it was intended for one use. Now it's adjusting to something else, which of course is fine. But in this scenario, it seems so significant. We definitely need clarity as to how it's being addressed or how it needs to appropriately be addressed. So regardless of responsibilities, it sort of comes down to, the city. It affects us. So I think that's the overall big picture from how I understand it. But any other questions on this item, Jim, Joyce?
Mr. Chair, it seems to me that, I'm not sure who is supposed to deal with that, with those number of trips. And certainly, it seems to me site plan review requires traffic planning in the same way that the Big Park North development as a whole did. So perhaps the city's attorney and the attorneys for the other two parties can try to sort this out sooner rather than later. Because otherwise, I'm not sure how we can apply our site plan standards on traffic to the Aroma Joe's parcel.
Is that a legal question that we're talking about, Emily, or is?
I think at this point, it's a legal question and then a question for the DOT. So I think we know the question is out there, and we will certainly work as staff on our end to address it. And I think it would be important for the applicant and the original permit holder to address it as well simultaneously, and then to kind of coordinate with staff and get those comments back to the planning board. Is that what I'm hearing too from the planning board? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So we still have a public hearing open. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, seeing no additional interest in speaking, I move to continue this public hearing to a later date.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff.
Second?
Second by Jim, thank you. Those in favor of continuing the public hearing to another meeting? Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. So, board members, looking at this project as a big picture, we have the amendment for the lots, the 13th subdivision amendment, and then we have the components of Aroma Joe's. And just as Emily suggested, sort of looking at it as a whole, do the board members have any questions, comments, concerns on the site plan portion of this for Aroma Joe's? I think would you like to present for Aroma Joe's or anything in particular, or?
No, just if you
Just
folks have
ready
any
for-
questions.
Just ready
I'm-
for questions, all right.
Yeah, I'll try to answer them for you.
He's anticipating questions. That's good. Let me get my document and my notes open here. I had a few.
Mr.
Jim, go
Chair,
ahead.
I just have one
Sure.
brief question. On the for the site plan, I understand better now. It took a while to understand this, but I think I understand the traffic pattern and the easements back and forth between the, I'll call it the athletic complex versus this site for Aroma Joe's. It looked as if there were easements written back and forth between the parties to allow for traffic usage and parking and so forth. One thing I didn't really notice was, and this is a small item perhaps, but there's a dumpster that's going to be located someplace close to the athletic complex. Is that supposed to satisfy both the athletic complex as well as Aroma Joe's, or?
No, the athletic complex has an existing dumpster.
So this is just for the
Aroma Joe's and the retail.
Aroma Joe's?
Yep, and the future retail.
And do you think that the easement that was drafted covers, I mean, it covers parking, it covers travel, it covers all that? I didn't see anything in the easement that talked about, you know, dumpsters, for instance. And maybe I'm not familiar enough reading easements to know, I mean, there were words in there like improvements and so forth, but I don't know if that includes that sort of, that use, and I hope it does, because it would be unfortunate if the dumpster couldn't be there.
We can take a look at that.
Okay. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions from board members?
Mr. Chair?
Jim, sorry, Jeff.
No problem. I had some kind of questions on how this queuing line works, you know, to the northwest side of the building. You've got like 3 lanes there. 2 of them are just going to be kind of courtesy, and they're going to alternate one at a time as they kind of go around the drive-through, hopefully.
Yes,
Have you used this model at other locations
yes.
and successful pre-coffee?
Yep, the critical part of that was adding that raised. Before, we just kind of were leaving it to the goodness of folks. We've since added that raised concrete island, and then Diane came back with comments on the signage of, which have been added to the plan at the entrance to use both lines, and then there's a sign for alternating merge there. But they've had good luck with it in the past. Particularly forcing that merge with that concrete island.
Any additional thoughts? Joyce?
I mean, no, the traffic part makes sense to me now, and it sounds like you satisfied Diane's questions, and I'm happy to see the landscaping review. Sounds like that was satisfactory as well. So,
Yeah,
you know.
I agree. I liked the landscaping was, Regina was happy with that. Walter, one item that came up that caught my attention was the mechanical equipment for Aroma Joe's. I didn't see anything specific on the site, and I thought I had seen a version of this that talked about it on the rooftop, but then I don't see anything on the rooftop here. So I guess that was one question, is where are the mechanical equipments, if any? And are they screened? Do they live on the roof? Do they live on the ground?
Yeah, if you look at the architectural sheet A200, which is the building elevations, on the lower flat area in the back, there are some mechanical devices there. Now, anything that's there that's sort of above the knee wall will be screened with some level of fencing or some screen of some sort. I think some original plans, these are, before we had a general footprint, and that's been reduced on the site plan, but it's that flat area that I remember the mechanicals being, if they're visible, they're going to screen those.
And that's on the building elevations here?
Yeah, if you look at the left elevation, where the upper roof drops down to sort of a flat roof, there are some mechanicals in that area. Whether they'll show, at this point, I can't say, but the applicant's aware of that they'll need to screen that if that is visible.
Okay. I'm not sure if I have an old,
No, I think
different version. I
the old plan showed something up there, and that's where that question was raised from. But since we've got our final floor plan here, a little bit different.
okay. I guess, I'm not sure if any board members see, unfortunately, I don't.
You're talking
wish I had
about
the
the,
screen.
you're talking about the mechanicals being on the flat part of the roof,
Yes.
which would be the last
Yep.
I just don't see it. The plan I'm looking
image
at
in our,
doesn't say anything about.
doesn't show any.
It doesn't- I
And
don't-
it doesn't show any screening.
I don't see anything that says mechanical. I don't see anything that talks about it screening or anything even being there. That's why I'm asking.
I think on the original plans at like sketch and preliminary, there was an AC unit up there that showed above that upper knee wall. That's where the comment came for screening there.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess what I would look for is additional clarity as to what's happening there. I see the limit of the parapet. I see ceiling lines in there. I'm not quite sure how tall the parapet is or if there's any equipment. That's sort of my question is
Okay.
ensuring that if there are equipment up there, it's screened and understanding how tall the parapet is, what the visual impact is
Okay.
of any of that equipment. That's, just to simplify, that's sort of the question.
Are you looking at like page 190 of 212 for the sketch of the Aroma Joe's building?
No, I'm looking at the packet from this week. Perhaps you're looking at the older packet.
Could be.
Let me open up that briefly. Yeah, so that's where I saw the question and the comment. So that's, the packet for this meeting is different than this.
Okay.
So that's sort of where the question came from.
Yeah, I guess we've changed that design a little bit. So there's two condensers up there that those won't be visible.
Okay, so that'll, I guess we just, for the new plan, if they're there, just understanding how they're screened.
Okay.
I guess that's I guess my only comment right now. Any other questions from board members?
Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, and there was a note on some of the staff review at one point about we should include a condition of approval for, or in the condition of approval, we should have written easement for pedestrian use of the sidewalk that fronts along the Portland Road.
Yes.
Has that been worked out between you and the city at this point?
Just as part of the conditions of approval, that be taken or squared away and recorded prior to pulling a permit.
So it's nothing that you and your client have problems with at this point?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
I think we've addressed it on the plan. It has not been prepared and recorded.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from board members? So, I guess, Emily, for clarity, continued a public hearing. And I guess we opened that public hearing under the project and the property. Would that prohibit the board from making a finding or a determination on the subdivision amendment portion of this? What's your, and without speaking with the board, but just sort of so we understand direction here?
Well, I think my direction is that you had wanted us to follow up with legal review on the easements, which is kind of more of a subdivision matter. You certainly have options, but, and then follow up on the traffic movement permit, which is kind of a site plan matter. So I think I took it as you were continuing the hearing, and if that is for both applications, and if that is the case, then I would just recommend that you make a motion to continue both applications so that it's clear for our record here.
Okay, I agree. That was my understanding as well. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Board members agree? Okay, great.
And Emily, can that be one motion, or should that be two motions? One motion to combine
It can
both
be one
hearings?
motion, provided it just references both the subdivision amendment and the site plan review. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we continue hearing on the subdivision amendment and site plan review applications.
Second.
Thank you for the motion in the second. Any other discussion? So motion made and second to continue review of this application, being the 13th subdivision amendment and site plan review for map 62, lot 1 through 5. Additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. So we'll continue this, Emily, with the items that the board members presented and discussed this evening that you've noted. Do we have a potential date to see this application again?
So when it's continued, we usually put it on the next agenda. So May 7th would be that next agenda. We do have other items on that list as well, so we could have a packed night on May 7th. I would just ask that you make a statement if it is going to be May 7th, that you're continuing it to May 7th. This just makes sure that people heard it at a public setting, that it was continued to May 7th.
So would you recommend that we amend the motion, or we just make a statement?
You can just make a statement.
Okay, so if board members agree, we'll table the application as the motion was presented to May 7th.
Does that give every piece time to fall into place? Or is that overly optimistic?
Even if it's overly optimistic, then it could be tabled, or if you prefer, you can choose May 28th, but it seems like a long way out.
I think being optimistic, I think I'd prefer to review it May 7th, we said, and if there are things still to be unresolved, then we could address it at that time.
I agree.
And if I may just ask, our traffic peer reviewer is not available. She was not available tonight. She will not be available on May 7th. So there is her peer review in the packet. We can certainly ask her to come for a future Park North TMP workshop. It just seems like she has a conflicting planning board night on the same Tuesday. So just want to make sure you know she probably will not be available May 7th.
Understand. She would be able to review any memos or any information or documents that are presented for that meeting.
Yes, in the interim, you would get a review memo from her, just like you did at this meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. Did that cover all of those items? I believe it did, yes. All right. Thank you, sir. We will see you May 7th.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda this evening, I guess I'll ask the board if they wish to take a brief recess or continue on.
Can we take a short recess?
Yes, let's take a short 5-minute recess. All right, great, thank you, everyone. We'll resume, it's 8:30 PM. Continuing our agenda this evening, our next item is HEP USA and 3 Saco LLC. This is a site plan and conditional use review for installation of a 19.6 megawatt solar array on New County Road, map 95 lots 2, 5, 6, 7, and map 94 lot 7 in the RC and West Residential zoning districts. This is a continued application of completeness and a public hearing. With us this evening, we have the applicant's representatives, CV and Mahar, engineers. Anything additional that you would like to add, Emily? Additionally add?
No, thank you. We did receive, oh, well, I guess I do, the Conservation Commission's report. I think we're going to talk about the site walk as well as that meeting. So they provided their updates. They heard directly from the applicant at their meeting directly after the site walk. 2 members of that commission also joined the planning board on its site walk. We did receive applicant responses on some of the questions. Our city engineer is reviewing these responses to questions that we received last week, and will be providing us an update. Once that's available, we'll share it with the board. Some things that were provided in the updated materials include a vegetation conceptual plan, as well as the requested plan about the tree information, more tree information. And tonight you're asked to determine whether or not you find the application complete, and then to open the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any questions for Emily, board members? Not seeing any. Perhaps Jeff here would like to give us a brief update.
Sure. So Jeff Reed with CV Mahar Engineers. And yeah, just kind of a quick recap since the last time that we met. As Emily had mentioned, we did schedule a site walk, which we had a couple of weeks ago. And a good number of the board members and some of the Conservation Committee were able to join us out there. And following the site walk, we came back here. We met with the Conservation Committee, had a great meeting with them. I think it was very productive. We were able to answer a lot of questions for them, and I think hopefully resolved a lot of issues and potential concerns. We'd responded to the most recent round of the city engineer's comments. Most of those were based on a follow-up meeting that we had with him, so we were able to talk through and really understand his questions and his concerns. I believe and I hope that this latest written response is going to alleviate most of those. And again, we have provided a tree clearing plan and study. We had a timber harvester come out, cruise the property, and provide information. There were multiple different districts and groves that were identified, and he essentially was able to provide an estimate of trees in excess of 20 inches in diameter. It worked out roughly to 1 to 2 trees per acre through the different portions of the site. One other thing, I guess in particular for Planning Board member Brochu, I did not include this with the comment response, but there were some sightline issues that you had mentioned at the Planning Board that we had done for Guy Picard's property and utility corridor going through, and you had expressed an interest in seeing some of those. I have those electronically here and can bring them up on the screen if you'd like to see them. If you think that'd be helpful, okay. We had prepared 2 plans initially to support the easement going along the Picard property. And what we outline here, whoops, sorry, a little too quick there. There we go. Is that not coming through? I'm showing it on my screen, but it's not coming through
No, we don't seem to see
there,
it on.
Emily. Is there a trick to,
If you want to try clicking it and then clicking it back on and off,
clicking this? Okay.
yeah. And then try clicking it again.
There we go, okay. So this was the initial plan, and this is the section along the back, just before we kind of cut diagonally across over to the Central Maine Power Company corridor. The heavy dashed line represents the 50-foot easement that we had coordinated through there. And you can see that once we come up along this edge here, we'd shifted, we're basically hugging the inboard side with the 20-foot clearing limit for the utility corridor. One of the things that we did do after the site walk, there was a group that went over to the Labonte house, because there were some concerns there about visibility from his residence, and these are concerns that we want to make sure that we alleviate. What we were able to do initially, and there are some things that HEP is trying to work through right now, but initially, and what this shows is we're able to crowd that 20-foot clearing area to the far side of the easement, which will provide a 30-foot wooded buffer between the property line and the clearing along this southern and this western border. The Labonte's house is right over here. The second part of that initial study was kind of a basic sightline analysis where we had used existing topography. We'd gone out, we'd actually measured tree heights and provided deck on the back of Guy Labonte's house. And you can see here, if we kind of blow this up a little bit, you know, that is a scale version of the deck and the elevation and a height and a sight line going across over to the tree lines and the proposed utility poles. Those are roughly 30 feet high, and some of the trees that were surveyed in the area. Again, we did not pick up every tree, but we got an accurate representation. You can see these red lines here. If I blow up on these, oops, sorry, represent kind of the extents of some of the survey, some of the elevations, and some of the tree heights that were measured along the edge of that existing cleared area. Again, here is the deck elevation base, you know, height for the sight line and the existing Picard residence. So that was, it's a pretty rudimentary, you know, sightline analysis, but that's what we had prepared for HEP when they were coordinating that easement. We can provide a hard copy if you want.
Yep.
If we go back to the previous picture,
Yep.
you're showing the sight line, that is from Mr. Picard's
Correct.
property.
We haven't gone out and done any additional study out here.
No, completely understandable, obviously. I don't think anybody heard any concerns from Mr. Picard. He's the one that's obviously granting the easement on his parcel.
Right.
You know, and that's fine. It gives me a sense of the height of the trees. I was thinking more in the clearing, just so the board members would understand how high the transmission line would be in reference to the trees, and that obviously depicts that fairly accurately, comparison with the trees that are posted, the 57-foot trees.
Right.
I guess I was looking for more discussion possibly for the Labonte property. And now what I heard you say in that part of the presentation is that you're going to shift it, the construction of the easement to the easterly side of
Yes.
the corridor.
Yeah.
Trying to And what is the width of your current easement now?
So it's a 50-foot wide easement, and it's going to include a 20-foot wide cleared corridor within the easement. So rather than running it down the middle of that 50-foot wide, we're running it all the way on the eastern edge, which basically will clear all the way to the edge of the easement, and it will leave roughly 30 feet of existing wooded area between the common property line between Picard and Labonte, just to provide something there for right now. And this is what we could do right away.
So the easement, so did I understand that from the property line of Labonte and Picard,
Yes.
there is a 25-foot setback before the easement of 50 feet starts?
No.
Or the easement goes right up to the property line?
The easement starts at the property line and then goes 50 feet into the Picard property.
Okay. And,
And what we're doing is we're shifting the cleared utility corridor as far as we can away from the common property line to provide as much buffer as we can between the Labonte property line and the cleared area. The utility line will actually be in the center of that 20-foot cleared area. So the utility line will be roughly 40 feet away from the property line. But the edge of clearing it'll be 30 feet.
And Jeff, just to continue on that, the terms of the easement, they wouldn't limit, or they would limit you to not clearing beyond that easement. The limit of your
Correct.
clearing for the lines are within the easement.
Right.
Not
We
putting
need
the
to-
line on the easement and then clearing beyond that.
We need to keep the utility line and the clearing. We only have rights within the easement.
Within the easement.
Right.
Okay. Understand.
So
Okay.
that is what we've been able to accomplish since the last meeting.
All right, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Jeff?
so, Mr. Chair, while we're on the topic of the Labonte Picard property, there was discussion that HEP would at least look into the feasibility of considering an underground section there. Has that a decision been made on HEP's part that that is not going to be an option, that this is?
I believe that's one of the things that we're working through right now. We've met with Jason, had a phone meeting, and we're.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Can we pause for half a second? So I don't want to go too far because Emily, we haven't deemed the application complete, right? So technically, we shouldn't go too far with requesting okay. So
Yes.
not to take a step back here, but to take a step
No,
back.
that makes sense to keep everything in order.
Yeah, so we have, I guess, let's go back to any questions on the updated application materials. Let's start there. On the forestry report, I think that was the bulk of the information that we requested. We have that information. We had a brief update to that during our site walk. Now we have all the numbers. Let's start there. Any questions from board members regarding that document? So as was mentioned in the field, it seems to be 2-ish per large trees over 20-inch diameter per acre. Some of these stand areas that are called don't have any trees in that size. That makes sense to me from being out there on site. So, having reviewed this, I guess for me, this seems to be, I guess, what I was looking for. I think it meets the intent of the ordinance. Any other thoughts or questions from board members?
No, I think these are the missing pieces in terms of what I thought we needed to determine that the application was complete.
I agree, Mr. Chair, and I'll move to find that the application's complete.
I'll second.
All right, thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Joyce. Any additional discussion?
I should actually note that move to find the applications for conditional use and site plan review complete.
Thank you for the clarity, Jim.
Right. I'll second that as well.
All right, motion made and second to find the application for site plan and conditional use review complete for HEP Solar Farm at New County Road, map 95, lots 2, 5, 6, 7, map 94, lot 7, to be found complete. Those in favor, Jim?
Yes?
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Application has been found complete. So with that, moving on this evening has been noted as a public hearing when the board is prepared. And I believe Emily, if you agree, that allows us to keep going. So, Jeff, apologies for the interruption, but let's continue with your question, please, regarding the, I believe you were starting to ask a question about some underground transmission lines. Or-
Yeah, so I guess my question was if HEP hadn't made a determination, just obviously non-binding, but we were discussing options during the site walk. Because I had questions about the setback of a structure, you know, and the way that they were talking, it sounded that line was, the utility line was going to be in that right 25 feet of the property line, which to me, a utility line is definitely a structure, and at different points we've gone back and forth about what the definition of a structure is. So, I mean, I'm glad to hear that they're willing to move it to the right, but I'm also thinking of all homeowners when you invest in a property and you decide where you're going to place your home and you know that the neighbor can build something. I think we all think of a garage or the side of a house, maybe a pool. We don't think of a transmission line. And, you know, obviously that's kind of a concern for an unforeseen type of construction. It's kind of like the DOT wanting to put a highway through the side of it's a different use for your aesthetic beauty.
Right.
So I was just wondering, and it kind of makes some sense too, is to be underground when you deliver to the point of demarcation of the CMP property. And so I was just wondering where you guys were with that.
So we're exploring a number, we've looked into a number of different options, including going underground, and that was one of the things that we had discussed in our follow-up meeting with Jason. A couple complications there that they're still looking into, or the length of the line, that would go from the point of the connection point over by the power station, all the way in. We're talking about over 1,000 feet of, 1,000 feet of underground line. We know there's ledge out there because we've seen some outcrops. So that's one thing that they're looking into. Another that we looked into was kind of coming straight across and going over the Labonte's driveway because we're not sure exactly how much there is, but there appears to be a cleared area adjacent to the existing utility corridor that's just outside the utility corridor that we might be able to take advantage of as well. Because as we discussed on site, we didn't go straight out to the corridor because CMP wouldn't let us. But if we could go adjacent to it in an existing cleared area, that was something that we looked into. Unfortunately, that area was fairly heavily populated by there were locations there identified for pendulous bulrush, which was one of the endangered botanical species that the Natural Areas Program Survey had identified in the utility corridors. So that was kind of a non-starter there. They want a 250-foot setback from those, so that that complicated that issue. We're still looking into other items and haven't finished that yet. But I did at least want to show what we can do, certainly as a minimum, until we kind of work through the rest of those studies.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, I'll move to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second.
Thank you for the second, Joyce. Motion made and seconded to open the public hearing for this item. Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Public hearing is open. Any members of the public that would like to speak on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and address. Thank you.
Good evening, Jason Labonte, home with 57 Smutty Lane. Feels weird being on the other side. We have been talking about some different alternatives, and so far the only option seems to be going down that sideline of my property line. I have expressed to them that I definitely do not want to see any overhead lines going by my property, and tried to discuss about how we could possibly get this underground. They've had concerns about ledge, which it's not a big deal. You can blast, you can do anything, or you could actually build it up. You don't necessarily have to go down. You could actually build it up and mount over the lines. I've actually did it in my office. So I definitely have some concerns about having these poles that are going to be 40 feet tall. After you put them in the ground, they're going to be 32 to 35 feet tall. You guys were kind of seeing my house at the site walk. My house is 24 feet tall. So just imagine a pole that's going to be, close to 10 feet taller than my house. So it's not, kind of give you a visual, like this isn't like something small. So one of the big concerns is, well, actually I had a few concerns. So one of the things is, we were never on the abutter list, so I kind of feel like I'm really like rushing this. I'm not sure exactly. I think you guys are like one meeting away for like final on this thing. So I kind of wish I had some more time to kind of digest some of this and try to work out some different alternatives with these guys. I mean, I like the project. I just don't like the lines going by my house, 40 feet up in the air. So I don't know if that kind of gives us grounds to kind of stretch this out a little bit, to kind of give us a little bit more time to kind of figure out what's going on with this. Because obviously that's something that should have been done. I mean, these guys have been working on this for a year, and I just find out last week, and it was a site walk, and it's because I'm going to have lines going by my house. So a few things I want to go over. Section 180-5, direct grid connections. To the extent practical and allowable by National Electrical Code, all utility connections between a commercial solar energy system and main regulated public utility receiving the power produced by commercial solar energy system shall be made underground at identified location on the property where the solar system is to be sited. So, commercial solar system, we're supposed to be underground. Yeah, I can understand there might be areas, where they're proposing overhead. You might be trying to protect some wetlands or some wild species, and there might be some areas where it kind of makes sense to kind of give a waiver. But going by a residential house, I just don't see how that's even a waivable thing. Further down in section 230-722 for commercial solar energy systems, C.1. Utility connections, applicant make reasonable efforts to place all utility connections on the ground. Again, the whole entire solar array system's on the ground except for the biblical cord that's going by my house. Section 230-2103, terms defined. Structure, Jeff, you asked, what is a pole, is it a structure, or what it is. So I pulled up the definition in the city ordinance. So the definition of a structure is anything constructed or erected, the use of which requires a fixed location on or in the ground, or an attachment to something having a fixed location on the ground, or requires specialized equipment to move. Pretty much a structure. We get into section 230-722C2, visual impact. Applicants should make reasonable efforts to minimize visual impacts by preserving natural vegetation, screening abutting property, and protecting scenic resources. Section D3, setbacks. Commercial solar energy systems must comply with the setback requirement of the underlying districts, provided, however, that all structures, including solar panels, must be set back at least 100 feet from the abutting residential property, which, looking at all their plans, everything seems to be 100 feet except for my house. So, again, underground, I don't care if it's 30 feet away. I think as a structure, it's a structure. It should be at least 100 feet. If they're going overhead, it should be 100 feet from residential properties. Section 230-1406, conditional use permit. Section A5, the use will not have significant detrimental effect on the value of adjacent properties. That could be avoided by reasonable modification of the plan. I think it's pretty reasonable to modify underground power that's going around my property. Section 230-708, transmission lines. Burial, all transmission lines shall be buried when they pass within 200 feet of any residence, school building, school playground, publicly owned recreational facility, field or park, or occupied place of employment, but otherwise may be placed above ground. When installed underground, they should be located in locations and in sections of sufficient length that unsightly transition structures shall not be minimized. So again, that's in the section for transmission lines. Section 23607 for screening, non-residential uses abutting residential districts. The side and rear yard of a non-residential use which abuts a residential conservation or resource protection overlay district shall be maintained in a natural state to provide a visual screen between districts. Section 179.5.01 for purpose. Encourage building design that maintains and enhances the character of continuity of Saco's built environment, public realm. That section, I mean, underground power is required in all subdivisions. You know, that's kind of a section for subdivision requirements, so I don't know why we have to do it in all my subdivisions, but, you know, then we have this main line that's gonna go from a solar farm over to a substation, and we don't have to do it at that point. And everybody can argue whether this is high voltage, medium voltage, low voltage, but, you know, according to your high transmission standards, it has to be 200 feet. And according to all low voltage for residential, it has to be underground. Completely, regardless of distance from any abutting property. So we get into section 179, okay, hold on, I got that one. 179.601, criteria for site plan approval. Compliance with all applicable standards. The proposed development should comply with all good neighbor standards, performance standards, and zoning ordinance, and applicable standards of natural resource districts. Section D's natural features, structures, and other improvements are harmonious in the site's natural features, preserve natural landscape, and minimize grade changes. And Section E is access to the site and structures is adequate for emergency responders and will not create fire hazards or other safety hazards. So I guess my big question with this is, if we're cutting a 20-foot narrow strip of property and we're not pulling stumps, we got poles every 200-300 feet, and if a tree falls on this thing, how are we removing a tree? What happens if a fire starts and my house is 100 feet away and the fire department can't go over there and try to put out this forest fire with my house nearby? So I have concerns about if we're going to be doing, I understand that we're trying to minimize the tree cutting, but at the same time, like, how does that work with all our main storms? I mean, we just had how many trees went down and we lost half the power in the state of Maine last week. So I understand they sit back and say, well, that's our problem. Well, if a tree falls on their property and I got electricity arcing 40 feet from my house and my kids playing outside, it's not just their problem, but it's also my problem. So I found multiple things on our ordinance that says underground, 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 underground. I didn't find anything in here that says okay is okay, overhead is okay. So I guess to the planning board, my question, or what I've asked of you, is to make a requirement that it has to be underground, within my property line of at least 200 feet or visually, so it cannot be seen, period. Notice they pulled up Pickard's graph on there, and, he's 300 feet from his house, and he's the one giving the easement. So yeah, it's great for him, he's getting a monthly check and giving up an easement with the burden onto me. So, but appreciate your time, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm William Fournier. Residential address is 18 Wendy Way, but I am also the owner of one of the plots of land that is being used. I own land off of the Boom Road, which extends towards Poolin's Pit and those areas. Growing up here in Saco, lived here pretty much all my life. Spent a lot of time on the hayfields, up and down the Boom Road, Loudon Road, 112, Simpson Road. Really enjoyed that, and it always bothered me to some degree to see a lot of the land developed, especially my own grandfather's brother's farm right next door, which was developed once he passed away. Always struggled with how to keep the land in the family and keep it accessible to people. We have people who snowmobile on it, hunt on it, fish, because we're all on the river, sledding parties, all of that. People enjoy the land more than just us, and we don't mind that. We enjoy that. I'll be honest, when they first approached me, I was a little, I don't know, do I want to give up some of the land for a set amount of time? But looking at it and looking at the fact that if we didn't do something, it was going to eventually be a house lot. So we wanted to try to find a way to save it, and this seemed like a good way to do that, good compromise, leasing the land up, but we get to keep the rest of the land, and we get to let people enjoy the land. In some of the plans that they put together, they also, which I pushed for, was ways for animals so not one big fence, but where animals could migrate. So I'm just here, I guess, to say that I'm in support of it. Obviously, I'm one of the benefits of it too, so I want to make that clear. But when you look at it, one of the benefits is you've got an income stream, I understand, from them in tax, but you don't have, if this were house lots, sure, you get tax on the house lots, but then you got to maintain roads, you got schools for the kids, everything like that. So this is a way to keep a section of Maine accessible to people, because some of our land is open space, people can walk on it. But again, we allow people to snowmobile, hike, all those things, snowshoe. I understand there is a disagreement here on that. I hope they work that out. But I just wanted to come up here and give my support for the thing, to hopefully help landowners like myself, and I can't speak for the others who are part of it, but I assume they're partially in the same boat. They'd like to keep it and keep it accessible. So I just wanted to get up and say that. Thanks.
Thank you. Back to board members. Thoughts? Any additional questions? Emily, I had a few for you, and unfortunately, I guess I'll ask you because Dave Toomey's not here, but I don't think we had any specific comments or concerns from Dave, but I know it's fallen to him in the past, some of these definitions and determinations from his office. Has he had a chance to review this project in that great or that specific detail as to, I guess, evaluate any of these questions specifically or components? I mean,
The specific question was not raised directly to Dave, but we heard it on the site walk, and now if you want to send it back through me to send to code enforcement, then we can get an update from the code enforcement department on their review of it. Additionally, I do want to, if it's appropriate now, Mr. Chair,
sure.
I do want to mention the question on, or the mention of radius distance of mailing. We're constantly improving that process. We did take a look at it, and the project where the solar panels are being placed is what was used to, I believe by the applicant and by the planning department, was used to generate that abutter list. And because of the size of the project, we saw the vast size, it was just probably outside of the 600-foot radius. When it was brought to our attention, we remailed to the additional properties to make sure that others were aware as well. And we remailed that, we mailed notices out as soon as the Labontes brought it to our attention. So I just want to make sure that you knew there was some follow-up on that question. It also is a good question for us going forward if there's going to be like water line extension work or work across in a right-of-way in another part of the project, flagging those properties that are abutting that extension work, because we have not done that in the past. We usually just focus on the project site and go 200 or 400 feet out from it using our computer program. So I hope that clarifies maybe why someone didn't receive notice, but we did follow up pretty much immediately when we heard that that was a missing component.
All right, thank you for the additional information. I guess for me, getting some clarity from Dave Toomey on some of these items, I think, would benefit. They were items I had as well noted reviewing the application during our last meeting. So I'm curious as to a few of them as well. But as we know, it's not for the board to determine definitions. That falls on the code officer. Any other board member questions, thoughts, concerns? Jeff?
Mr. Chair, thanks. Well, I'm always happy when the public's engaged, and I like it when I'm not the only one that's reading through all the different articles and citing very specific ordinances. So thank you for bringing that forward. And because I too tend to read things in a very similar light. You know, for me, a structure, I mean, we can't argue when you're setting a 35-foot or 40-foot utility pole that's got 12 to 1,600 pounds weight static of just the pole, that's not a structure that you're rigging with equipment. We all know digger derricks are out there. The whole line stringing process is a very involved construction. So in my mind, it's very definitely a structure. The tough part is that a lot of the safety codes aren't going to really drive a great horizontal distance. Typically, our setbacks are going to be greater than what the safety codes would typically drive. But when our ordinances are drafted and different interests are used to draft it, whether it be the ZORS committee or whether it be when the main reliability project was going on and there were no transmission lines near the school, there was a big pushback. This is kind of the consequence, is that now we have it in our ordinances that it's very specific that all these lines are to be placed underground. And then we have a solar committee that drafts a new section that's saying that all these lines are to be placed underground, which makes it a very difficult stand for us to sit here, for me anyways, to sit here and say, we're complying with these ordinances, but we'll give you a waiver. And that's, that's the difficult part for me. For my professional world, the lines above ground have a lot of benefits for reliability, or long-term maintenance, I should say. But then they have aesthetic downfalls. And when you start bringing in the detrimental impacts for somebody who owns property, like I said, it's a real different ball of wax. When I first looked at the site, I was concerned about the vegetation. The applicant was great. They mapped it all out. We did the site walk. It's pretty clear that that land was harvested. It's pretty much a slash brush land. And, the city has very clearly stated to us their objectives for some renewable power. It's, in my opinion, well hidden from the most roadways. It's kind of tucked in this little pocket. As Mr. Fournier pointed out, it's kind of a great way to preserve some land. It's going to be used, but not permanently developed. So it has, a fair amount of things that the city has inclined to us as a board, that their goals and objectives, and it would meet that and check those boxes. So kind of, at my point where I am, I just have a really difficult time with this issue right near the Labonte's house, where it's developed and exposed. We can say that it's a 20-foot clear cut. There's maintenance that needs to go on. They need to get tracked vehicles. That 20-foot, when they're maintaining that lower brush line, like we talked about in some applications, Ms. Leonard talked about, there's not a lot of cover from the ground. They can leave 20 feet of trees, but you're going to see right through that line. So I guess I'm optimistic in the sense that hopefully the applicant and the abutters, or the applicant, can present something that would kind of make both parties happy. And I think something to ease the visual impacts would be really important to me, because here we are going, oh, it's great, it meets all the goals or many of the goals of the city, but Mr. Labonte's going to have this on now both sides of him. Looks like he was pretty conscientious about placing his home to, be away from a CMP-owned transmission corridor. And so I guess it's just particularly hard for me because so many different places, as he pointed out, in our ordinance it says these lines are to be constructed underground. Do we just kind of throw the ordinances aside and say, oh, we're getting our goal of solar farms? For me, the solar market, I don't think it's the answer for our future, but that's my personal opinion. I can't let that affect weighing out the boards, and my position on the board, and here we are weighing out these ordinances, and to me, many of these boxes have been checked, satisfied, it's meeting city goals, but we also have to be respectful of current landowners, so this is kind of the one kind of pivoting point for me. Hopefully that they can come up with a better alternative for the visual obstruction, because it's not really impacting anybody else visually. There's a pretty big buffer around the entire parcel. So I guess I'm optimistic that hopefully before the final, there'll be some sort of a resolution that maybe everyone in the room would stand up and say, yeah, we support this, it's going to meet the city goals, and we can live with the proposed solution. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other board members' thoughts? Questions, concerns? Jim?
I'll join Jeff on those concerns too. There are a number of, and I appreciate Mr. Labonte bringing that up. There's lots of subsections of our ordinances which require the power lines to go underground, and I think we have to be attentive to that. I don't know if we need to grant a waiver if they aren't underground, but I think we're asked to, whenever, to the extent reasonably possible, that they should be underground. So I think hopefully the applicant can work with the Lebantes and come up with a solution that works for all of them. I mean, as you said, Jeff, you know, this project otherwise checks off so many boxes for the city. It's hard to say no to it, but this is a particularly one little piece that I think still needs to be solved. So after we close the public hearing, I think hopefully the applicant can work with Lebantes and come up with a solution.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just like the application we heard earlier, if this is going to be an item that we are asking the applicants to return with, an option for the board is to just leave the hearing open, so then you can hear again directly from the Lebantes. You certainly could ask them pointed questions afterward, but it might just be more transparent if it was left open, if that's where the board is headed.
Yes, understood. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Jim. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I guess you had indicated wanting, Director Toomey to weigh in on some of these, and I guess I'm assuming you were going with definition of a structure. And I guess if we're going to be directing some questions to Mr. Toomey, I would like to also include, now, if the poles are a structure, which I think they clearly are, but then we have to identify them as a transmission line, I believe, because part of our ordinance says that the transmission lines are exempt from the height restrictions of our ordinance, because this would be too high if it breaks 35 feet, I think, for that zoning district. And we have very clear ordinances for the transmission structure, but the transmission structure, I believe, states if it's owned by a public utility, and in this particular case, the applicant would be privately owned until the point of delivered into the node. So now it's a privately owned transmission line. And I guess if we could just get Director Toomey's opinion on those kind of 4 questions would be helpful.
Yes, those were the items that I was that's what I had in my head. Additionally, confirming the high voltage component of it as well. Yeah, there are a few items, a few pieces of the ordinance that don't seem to quite meet, but it's confusing, of course. So trying to, I think, getting his determination, clarity on that, I think that's definitely a part to the puzzle here. Joyce?
Yeah, just thinking the same thing, that makes a big difference in terms of, 1, do they have to be underground, and 2, what are the required setbacks here? Are we talking 50, 100, 200 feet?
Yeah, I mean, getting that clarity is key, of course, and then, I mean, if they're underground, the area is going to be disturbed. It's going to be modified, it's going to be cleared. The equipment would be underground versus on a pole. So of course you wouldn't see it, but understanding that it meets the ordinance or it doesn't, that sort of getting that clarity, because we've had the discussion before, we can't approve something that doesn't meet the ordinance, obviously, but making sure we have clarity as to the definition and how it's defined, that's key. Any other thoughts or questions?
I'm thinking we want to move to continue the public hearing.
Thank you.
Should we continue to a particular
date?
date?
To a date.
Are we talking May 7th still, or is that getting full enough that we should go to the 28th, Emily?
I think you have the flexibility to put it on May 7th and then work with what you have on the agenda on the 7th.
So I'd move to continue it to May 7th.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to continue the public hearing to May 7th. And just to be clear, we're talking the public hearing specifically. Those in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
A vote yes as well. So the public hearing has been continued to the May 7th meeting. So additionally, I guess specifically, we've discussed for Code Officer Toomey to clarify a determination on structure, setbacks that are applicable or not, clarity there. The transmission component, high voltage, I suspect conversations with the applicant and Toomey are going to be appropriate.
Yeah, usually how that would work is planning and code enforcement work together on the questions and then report back to the board and applicant.
And then additionally, whether or not that discussion, how those discussions go, but then to Jeff's question, between the applicant, discussion between the applicant and the neighbors here, Labonte's, and obviously the abutter there, the adjacent landowner that holds the easement, any further discussion or any work through if there's any other opportunity to make adjustments there to further improve the buffering. That was the bulk of your question. Is that correct? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they kind of understand where I am. It's a visual impact and buffering, buffering question and, loss of aesthetic appeal, enjoyment of your parcel.
Sure. So there's the understanding of the organization of the easement with the property line, but is there any opportunity to make an adjustment with that easement? I guess that's sort of the question that we don't know, and perhaps, I guess I know the project's been going on for a long time, and there's, I'm sure, been many sketches and plans and iterations of all this, but sort of understanding that process and sort of how this came to be in this particular scenario, I suspect. Is that fair thought?
So just so that I'm clear, in case the applicant has questions, I think you're looking for a written response or narrative explaining what has been done to date and asking the applicant if there's any way to put that underground. Is that, and if not, what a written response explaining where we are to date?
I think that is a good summary, Emily. I think, there's a lot of pages here. So just sort of, I guess, an example that I'm seeing is the line follows the property of Picard. It goes in that corner, and then it hits the next property behind Labonte. Forgive me, that's Central Maine Power. I guess that's, and then from there, it doesn't follow any property line there, it just sort of goes straight across. So there's obviously a reason that path has been taken. I think, not having been part of any of the conversations, I think that's just the question, or maybe the understanding. How come, for example, it doesn't cut the corner? How come it follows the property line and not straight across the corner, I suspect, is I guess that's sort of just on paper without seeing the lay of the land or topography. Maybe that's one question. Does that clarify? Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so for me, it's definition of a structure, the height of the structure, the height limit, the setback from the property line. The next question is this defined as a transmission corridor according to our ordinance? If it is, and we need to maintain, according to our ordinance, a 200-foot setback, that changes the whole ballgame, and they'd have to renegotiate how the easement or the path is going to be, because now they need to have clearance from both Mr. Pickard and Mr. Labonte to try to get through there if they stay overhead. So those are kind of all the criteria, so that we can, as Jim pointed out, we can point in the ordinances that revolve around a transmission line, if that's the case.
Yep. All right, thank you. Does that, any questions maybe from the applicant or the,
So yeah, just in terms of sequencing and everything else, I think a lot of this is going to hinge on definitions and interpretation of ordinance and code, which is going to come from the code officer. So we'd be interested in seeing those as soon as we can, as soon as they're available. I understand, I'm sure he's very busy, but, you know, obviously we've got a lot invested in this project so far. So it's something that we're looking to resolve as soon as we can. So I guess as a first step and a first task, that's what we'd be hoping for. And then based on those interpretations and understanding of the ordinance, that, you know, that we'd move forward at that point based on what those determinations are. You know, a little bit surprised because he's, you know, reviewed this project 3 times already and nothing's come up. But Mr. Labonte's made some great points, and we want to make sure that we do this correctly and appropriately. So we're looking forward to hearing what Code Officer Toomey has to say about this.
Mr. Chair?
Jim?
If I could just ask.
Sure.
It sounds as if you've been working with a variety of alternatives to try to find a fix around this problem.
Right.
Both for you and for the Labontes. And did I understand correctly that one of the solutions was altering the route that your line would take, perhaps underground, across another section of Labonte's property?
Yeah, so one of the things that we had looked into briefly based on discussions with Jason was coming, let me, hang on a minute. See if I can maybe bring something up to kind of point at here and show what we're looking at. But essentially the section that comes across towards his property before it makes that 90-degree up along his property line.
Yep.
We discussed potentially extending that straight across all the way over to the CMP corridor. And then picking up that area that there was some existing clearing on his land outside of the corridor that we might be able to run up along that edge. But a couple of issues there. One was coordinating above ground, underground, going across, because the same thing. I mean, Jason obviously doesn't want to see overhead lines, you know, or driving under overhead lines on his driveway. And then the other issue was that once we actually do hit that land adjacent to the CMP corridor, there was that endangered, that bulrush along that edge, which kind of made that prohibitive.
So, well, I hope you will, in the meantime, prior to May 7th, you'll continue to work with Labontes and
We are, and we're looking at different options. You know, there are a bunch of different considerations when it comes to installing a line like this with the voltages that they have. You know, there's just some physical constraints along that route that we had, especially going diagonally across that CMP parcel. I mean, there's a ridge and a hill that little bit more than a hill, but, so there are some issues there. You know, we've looked into coming in above ground and sinking to go around his property, so that section you wouldn't see. But there are some constraints there that creates what they call a lightning trap when you go above and under and then back up. So we're working with a bunch of different moving pieces here and trying to find, you know, the best alternative and what's really and truly reasonable here. You know, obviously, we're trying to work within the corridor that was negotiated. And that's just kind of where we're at right now.
Well, I appreciate everything you're doing to try to fix it, and, I mean, it's a great project, and I think everyone wants it to succeed. We just got to fix this one problem, I
Sure.
think, so.
I know we focused on this issue here. Were there any other serious questions or concerns about the rest of the project?
The only other question, I mentioned it briefly to Fire Chief, Chief Pendleton, Deputy Chief Pendleton, just sort of ensuring some of the grades seem pretty steep accessing the site for any of his apparatus, but he knows it much better than I do, of course. So if he says it can traverse those grades, then I believe him. But that was sort of that access, understanding how it was built, used. I know the sort of the agreement with how that's being maintained by the landowners there and how it's prepared, and that was only sort of not an official concern, but just sort of a point that I just wanted to make sure was addressed
Sure.
fully and appropriately. But
So one of the concerns and one of the responses that we had in the most recent round from the city engineer and his comments, and this didn't tie directly to grades necessarily, but he was concerned about signage and making sure that access road construction through the existing gravel pit would be appropriate and that sort of thing. And one of the things that he'd asked us to do was make sure that we did coordinate that with the fire chief and meet with the fire chief before that stuff was constructed. And that is fully our plan. We've actually pulled together, and it was included in this most recent round, some updated signage and wayfinding materials to help navigation through, through that area. So, I mean, that, I guess my point there is that there will be coordination with the fire chief, in particular on that access road through the existing Picard Enterprises pit.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments from board members? So I believe we've tabled the public hearing portion. I believe we need to make an official motion to table continued review to May 7th. With the items that we've discussed to be addressed. Unless there's anything else.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Jim to table the application to May 7th. Looking
Second.
for additional documents. Second by Joyce. No other additional discussion. Those in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. So we'll see you again on the 7th. And Emily will work with Toomey to coordinate some of these items.
Great.
Okay.
Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you. Emily, our next item on the agenda this evening is general correspondences.
We don't have any general correspondence.
All right, thank you. After that, any departmental updates or discussion?
Yes, so we have been asked to further incorporate a public comment section to the agenda. And so what that's going to entail is a minor update to our standard operating procedures document. So we want to update that document that we all reviewed back in December. And what I'm going to say is that planning department can provide an update on that and some suggested language on May 7th. I think it's going to be extremely important for process considerations that public comment be, if it's going to be an open public comment session, that it's be specified to discussion of topics not on the agenda that are under public hearing. So we'll just have to kind of clarify that language, and we're going to bring back some draft edits for the board's consideration, probably during a workshop, but we did get a couple of sketch plans, so I don't know, May 7th is looking long.
In that public comment portion, would that be early in the agenda? Is that the proposal, or during a workshop portion?
I believe it would be during the actual agenda itself as like a topic, but we will flesh all that out and bring it a draft for your consideration. We just need to make sure that it's updated in the SOP. I really would prefer us to like stay with that SOP document and not go outside of it.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
I'm just trying to get my head around, as much as I truly enjoy public comment, I think it's a huge part of the process, is what benefit is there of having a public comment session and being very specific that you can't talk about any items on the agenda, and we don't really have the power to bring things up as a board. I don't know, is this something that legal is saying that we should incorporate into our protocol of having a public comment session?
I've been requested through city administration to have a public comment section. I think that it's a move for all agendas to have public comments, so I'll be working a public comment option, so I'll be working with the other committees that we work with, but those other committees we work with are not as formalized as planning board, so it's like, right now, it's kind of like we even invite people to just somewhat speak freely during a lot of those, not all of them, but during some of those committee meetings. So this will just kind of be like a formal, we'll just include it as an SOP item. And like I said, we'll draft it up, and I think there'll be some time consideration to it as well, because the other thing I have a little concern about is we have very long meetings to begin with, so we'll just want to strike that balance as well. So that's just an update. We continue to review projects under review. The climate adaptation action plan final draft will very soon be available. We got our staff comments back. SMPDC made their updates, and now we just have to re-review that document and send it out for that comment period that I mentioned at the last meeting. We also are moving forward some other department initiatives, so I'm looking forward to seeing those come forward, including like the Route 1 visioning plan. So that's the Portland Road sub-area plan that we've been talking for a little bit, that has grant funding. We started our master plan initiative on that, and so we'll be moving forward. There'll be updates along the way for the planning board. We'll keep you in the loop. And then the Long Range Planning Committee is going to be very busy with that also.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We also mentioned, Emily, adjusting for the first meeting in June, going back to our 5:30 meeting times. Unless the boards have, I think that works for the board. Other than,
Would Would the board be okay trying to middle of the road, trying 6 o'clock maybe for a start time? Or do you feel like we are delaying a lot of applicants by starting at 6? I think at 6:30. I feel like we're pretty efficient.
I think we have been pretty efficient. I guess I think, why don't we perhaps say tentatively, we're going to adjust the time to an earlier time, starting in June, and then perhaps getting some input from Matt and Rob while they're here. Maybe we can discuss additionally when they're present.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with 6 as a compromise. That's fine. 6:30 is a little late for me, but 6, 5:30, either works.
I appreciate the going to 6:30. I can support 5:30, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, of course, makes it easier for me to get from Portland during the summer back into Saco. I know it's surprising, but there's a lot of traffic in both towns in the summer. But let's add Matt and Rob to the conversation and make sure we get their input as well. But
That's, either one's fine with me.
okay. I know Lisa has. She has to go south in the summer too, and a busy. Don't you travel south, and it's busy in the summer as well. It's
Not this
no.
time.
Oh, not late. Oh, okay. All right. Anything else? Any other items to discuss from board members? Emily. All right. I guess with that, we will adjourn at 9:42 p.m. Thank you.